Although the evidence at this trial shows that Charles Manson was the leader of the conspiracy to commit these murders, there is no evidence that he actually personally killed any of the 7 victims in this case. However, the joint responsibility rule of conspiracy makes him guilty of all 7 murders. He controlled everything that they did on a day-to-day basis. He even controlled their sex lives. Manson's total and complete domination over his family, including the actual killers, Tex Watson, Krenwinkel, Atkins, Leslie Van Houten, is extremely powerful circumstantial evidence that on the 2 nights in question, he was also dominating them and directing everything that they did. Now remember, we discussed during voir dire, we went over it ad nauseum, that from circumstantial evidence of one fact, we infer the existence of another fact. All of these defendants are charged in count 8 of the indictment with the crime of conspiracy to commit murder. Conspiracy is nothing more than an agreement, getting together, agreeing to commit a crime, followed by an overt act to carry out the object of the conspiracy. Conspiracies can be, and normally are, proven by circumstantial evidence. In this case, we prove the conspiracy by direct evidence. Linda Kasabian, ladies and gentlemen, was present with these defendants, and she told you everything that happened in her presence. To have a conspiracy, it is not necessary that the conspirators enter into any formal agreement. All that is necessary is that there be a meeting of the minds, that they be working together toward a common goal. There couldn't be a more obvious conspiracy than this case, ladies and gentlemen. To say that on these 2 nights, these defendants did not have a meeting of the minds, and they were not working together toward the common goal would just be totally preposterous. The object of the conspiracy on both nights was murder, and these defendants, working together with deadly and savage precision, carried out that mission of murder by mercilessly cutting down their victims. All defendants are guilty of count 8 of the indictment, the count of conspiracy to commit murder. Since Charles Manson was not one of the actual killers of the 7 victims, and since Susan Atkins was not one of the killers of Mr. and Mrs. LaBianca, under what rule of law are they guilty of these murders? Manson is guilty of all 7 counts of murder under the vicarious liability rule of conspiracy. It is also called the joint responsibility rule of conspiracy. And likewise, Susan Atkins is guilty of the 2 LaBianca murders because of the vicarious liability rule, the joint liability rule of conspiracy. The law is clear then that once a conspiracy is formed, each member of the conspiracy is criminally responsible for and equally guilty of crimes committed by his co-conspirators, which were in furtherance of the object of the conspiracy. As I stated in my opening argument, if A and B conspired to murder X, and pursuant to that agreement, B murders X, A, even though he was not the actual killer, is equally guilty of that murder. I don't care where he was. He could have been playing tennis, badminton, anywhere. He was a member of that conspiracy. He was guilty of that murder. That is the law of conspiracy. And there are just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Even if Charles Manson was merely a member, just a member of this conspiracy to commit these murders, and never killed anyone, he would still be guilty of all 7 murders. But here he is not only a member, he is a leader, the leading force behind all of these conspiracies. Charles Manson is a clever fellow, all right. He is clever, all right. In Manson's world, he probably felt if he never himself killed anyone, but had someone else murder for him, he was thereby immunized or insulated, as it were, from all criminal responsibility. Well, it is not quite that easy. And when you folks come back into this courtroom with your verdict of first-degree murder against Charles Manson, you are going to tell him it's not quite that easy. In the offbeat world of Charles Manson, he probably never heard of this rule of law. Well, he is learning about it right now. The law of this state, ladies and gentlemen, has trapped and subdued these defendants, just as they trapped and subdued these 7 helpless, defenseless victims who they so mercilessly murdered. All that can be expected of you as reasonable men and women is that you conscientiously evaluate the evidence in this case and apply your logic and your common sense and your reasoning powers and the law given to you by Judge Older to that evidence. and thereby reach a just and fair verdict. When you apply the law and your logic and your common sense and your reasoning powers to the evidence in this case, you won't have any difficulty whatsoever coming to the conclusion that the prosecution proved the guilt of these defendants beyond all reasonable doubt. Ladies and gentlemen, the prosecution did its job in gathering and presenting the evidence. The witnesses did their job by taking that witness stand and testifying under oath. Now you are the last link in the chain of justice. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Sharon Tate, Abigail Folger, Wojtek Frykowski, Jay Sebring, Stephen Perron, Lino LaBianca, Rosemary LaBianca are not here with us now in this courtroom. But from their graves they cry out for justice. Justice can only be served by coming back to this courtroom with a verdict of guilty. Under the laws of this state and nation, these defendants were entitled to have their day in court. They got that. They were also entitled to have a fair trial by an impartial jury. They also got that. That is all that they are entitled to. Since they committed these 7 savage, senseless murders, the people of the state of California are entitled to a guilty verdict.